If you're an otaku over a certain age, I'm sure you remember a time when anime was not only dog whistled over its edgy graphic content, it was actively marketed for it. Nowadays, we all know that anime has more to offer than just blood, guts, and sex. Sure, anime can be violent, but it can also be peaceful. Anime can be erotic, it can also be romantic. Anime is a medium that spans the far reaches of human emotion. To try and confine it to one definition or stereotype is an ignorant disservice to what anime can truly be. And yet, your parents don't understand it, your art teachers don't respect it, and your politicians try to ban it. Anime is no longer a niche form of animation for weird nerds. It is a prominent medium in the worldwide zeitgeist. So why does anime still have such a bad reputation in the West? Well, it's a long story. A long story that starts in 1976, when the VHS tape hit the Japanese market. Prior to the VHS, and an honorable mention to Betamax, there was no easy way to watch movies at home. And when a TV show aired, you had to wait for the channel to replay it months later. The VHS and Betamax revolutionized the home video market. Or to be honest, they basically created the home video market. You can now buy a physical release of a movie or TV show and watch it from the comfort of your own home. Well, you could if you had as much as $60 to spare. When Hollywood made its VHS debut, tapes were really expensive. So, a new industry formed to combat these outrageous prices and make movies even more accessible. This was the video rental industry, and by the late 80s, there were around 25,000 dedicated video rental stores in the US alone. Trips to video rental stores like Blockbuster or Hollywood Video became a weekend tradition for American families that lasted decades. Not to sound like a boomer, but with the accessibility that streaming services provide, kids today could never understand the joy of going to a physical store and paying money to bring home just one or two movies, only to give them back when the weekend ends. Just like Hollywood, the anime industry found home video releases to be a valuable resource for film distribution. But when it came to selling TV anime, they ran into some issues. Basically, it all came down to the sheer amount of episodes in a given anime clashing with the storage limitations of the VHS. Take a popular 80s anime like Dragon Ball, for example. That series has 153 episodes. You could fit about 3 or 4 25-minute episodes onto a single tape, but you would have to buy almost 40 tapes to collect the entire series. This inconvenience gave rise to an anime format designed specifically for home release. This was the genesis of the original video animation, or OVA. 1983's Dallos, directed by Mamoru Oshii, was the first OVA. Dallos not only proved that direct-to-video anime could be profitable, it also set the stage for every OVA to come. Dallos proved that a series could be a financial success without relying on TV airtime, theatrical release, toy sales, or paid sponsorships. Dallos itself was the product, and the only way to watch it was to buy the tape and bring it home. Dallos helped establish OVAs as a middle ground between TV productions and movie productions. OVAs are generally episodic, with around 4 episodes or less depending on the runtime per episode. An episode could be as short as 15 minutes to as long as over an hour of runtime.
Return to all the wonder and majesty of Disney's classic masterpiece as the story continues in an all-new animated movie, The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2.
In the West, direct-to-video animation had the connotation of being a cheap money-making ploy. In Japan, however, direct-to-video anime was basically an excuse for creatives to go all-out crazy. Many OVAs featured animation quality that could rival major motion pictures. A lot of heavy hitters in the anime industry proved themselves through their works in OVAs. I've already mentioned Dallas's Mamoru Oshii, who went on to direct Ghost in the Shell. But how about Gunbuster's Hideaki Anno, the creator of Evangelion? Or Fooly Cooley's Hiroyuki Imaishi, who went on to co-found Studio Trigger. The overall content of the average OVA is pretty varied. Many feature original content, but there are many adaptations as well. Most notably Hunter x Hunter, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and Sazan Eyes. While there are many OVAs intended to be viewed in that format, I do believe some OVAs are created as proof of concepts meant to eventually make the transition to TV anime. Those 3 OVA adaptations are good examples of this. That being said, there are also many OVAs that are never, ever meant to make the jump to TV. One of the precedents that Dallos inadvertently set for OVAs was its graphic content. Dallos featured amounts of violence and nudity that could not have made it onto a TV production. Many companies that intended to replicate the OVA's success took note of that, and pushed violence and nudity to their logical extremes. Megazone 23, Devilman, and Ninja Scroll. These 3 OVA staples of the mid-80s to early 90s ushered in a new era of anime. And this era was edgy as fuck. Whether a series wanted to shine a light on the desensitized nature of Japanese youth culture, or celebrate and fetishize the glory of blood, gore, and sex, these types of OVAs all had something in common. It was blood, gore, and, sex? To be completely honest, a lot of OVAs with this mindset haven't aged particularly well. But I don't think it's the content of these series alone that make them such an influential part of anime history. I think it's the ethos that these anime hold that make them such a cultural flashpoint. I believe that these violent and depraved OVAs influenced a generation of Japanese mangaka to try and create whatever bizarre, nuanced, or even oppressive ideas they had come up with. This allowed modern classics to be written, such as Dead Man Wonderland, Chainsaw Man, and maybe even Henshin. When it came to these OVAs' impact on the West, well, they were a generation's first impression of anime. Let's take a little detour to 1963 to talk about America's first wave of anime. Tetsuwan Atomu was brought over from Japan by NBC to air on their networks under the name Astro Boy. NBC had acquired distribution rights to foreign animation from multiple countries, including anime from Japan, with the revolutionary idea of redubbing pre-existing content to save animation costs. The adaptation process for Astro Boy was handled by the late great Fred Ladd, who sadly passed away in August 2021. Fred was an absolute pioneer in the American anime industry, not only for his work on Astro Boy, but also cult classics like Gigantor and Kim of the White Lion. He even was a consultant for Deke Entertainment's dub of Sailor Moon.
You've gotta be kidding!
Fred adapted these anime for American audiences through a process known as Westernization. Basically, anything seen as overly offensive, violent, or sexual was removed from these Japanese children's series to make them suitable for American children. In today's age of simulcast and subtitles, Westernization is seen as the devil of the anime community. And I totally get that, as someone who grew up watching 4Kids dubs. We live in an age where authenticity and accuracy is paramount in anime translations. I have seen people go off on Crunchyroll for localizing Japanese slang with an American equivalent because a Japanese girl would never say sus.
Sus.
But no matter how cringy or inaccurate these old westernizations are by today's standards, you have to give them credit for the path they laid for the big anime boom of the 1990s. From the 60s onward, distribution of localized anime content became a regular practice for American entertainment companies. But that isn't to say that America was experiencing an anime boom. The fact that these series originated from another country was very much an elephant in the room. The Westernization process was not only meant to erase all inappropriate allusions from these series, it was also to erase any notion that the content was not originally American. Astro Boy and Speed Racer were not anime to kids back then. They were merely cartoons where characters talk really fast. But that was all about to change. As the 80s came around, entertainment companies began to notice that some of the anime they were licensing was becoming harder to market for children. I don't care who you are, the amount of money it would take to rewrite and redraw Devilman to make it child-safe might as well be spent making your own original animation. Many companies understood this and opted to pander to an exciting new demographic: teenagers and adults. OVAs and movies were bought up by a new crop of distributors: Manga Entertainment, ADV Films, and Discotek Media, to name a few. And they were all in on the idea of animated violence. No longer were guns, blood, or cleavage being censored, but don't get me wrong, accuracy to the source material was definitely not their top priority. This generation certainly had its fair share of localizing mishaps, but at least they didn't shy away from the fact that their content was originally Japanese. In fact, it was one of their main selling points. Gen X teenagers were fed up with all the prim and proper sterilization in the media. They didn't want to watch cartoons where all the guns were lasers and none of the punches were allowed to connect. They just wanted some violence and nudity and maybe some swear words while we're at it. And companies played right into those needs. Every ad during this era promised blood, guts, and tits if you bought their tapes. But the most important part of each ad was to make sure everyone knew: these aren't cartoons. It's anime from the sick minds of Japan, and it's not for kids. I feel like the reason a lot of the promos focused on anime being from Japan was to create a sense of excitement or perversion. I guess because watching a violent or erotic animation wasn't enough. Like, they had to play up the fact it was foreign animation to give it the sense that you weren't supposed to be watching it. Well, eventually these OVAs and movies found their way into video rental stores, and the fact that the VHS covers looked like nothing else in the store only added to the intrigue of anime. With this newfound accessibility, slowly but surely small anime communities popped up all over the US. Now, I want you to keep in mind that this was a time before video games and comic book movies were as normalized as they are today. So when I say that anime communities were small back then, I need you to imagine small, isolated groups of dozens of nerds meeting up at the local comic book store or hobby shop. I can't lie when I say that anime fans themselves definitely played a part in smearing anime's reputation. For decades, the community has been rife with cult-like behavior and gatekeeping. But nobody smeared anime's good name like concerned parents.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Akira is an animated movie. If you knew nothing about anime, would you think to put Akira with other sci-fi horror movies like Alien, or would you put it with other animated movies like The Little Mermaid? Most rental stores at the time chose the latter route, much to the horror of oblivious parents. Slowly but surely, a new kind of anime community popped up. it was a community of parents against anime. Basically, they had all convinced themselves that evil corporations were trying to brainwash their children by making unwholesome cartoons. Because, of course, all animation is meant for kids, so they're totally victims in this situation, and not just a parent failing to realize that they've just bought their kid an R-rated film. I would definitely chalk up a lot of the hysteria to parents' lack of critical thinking. But there was one case where I kinda understand the outrage. So, all OVAs are anime, but not all anime is anime, if you know what I mean. The internet of the 80s and 90s was not what it is today, so if you wanted to watch your special videos, you had to either go to a special theater or buy a special tape. Yeah, so I'm talking about hentai, but back then Western fans weren't calling it that. One way or another, hentai tapes were being localized and distributed in the West. Eventually, these tapes were being put on shelves to be bought or rented, and eventually parents caught their kids with them. The most infamous of these tapes would be the Orosuki Doji series, or as it's known in the West, Legend of the Overfiend. This series was a trailblazer in the genres of beast porn and tentacle rape, but perhaps I should skip over that. Long story short, the damage was done, and anime had gained the reputation of being violent, rape-filled gore porn. Obviously, anime's reputation was not beyond repair. Anime distributors no longer market anime as being all action, or even as being for adults only. Pokemon and Hello Kitty are the world's most profitable franchises, right next to Disney. And Hollywood keeps trying to make anime adaptations the next comic book movie craze, despite most of their attempts falling flat. I told my friend about my idea for this video, and he told me that anime doesn't have a bad reputation anymore, because kids today are more accepting of it. I get where he's coming from, but I had to remind him that we were still in high school in the mid-2010s, and we kept our mouths shut about anime because we all knew that everyone makes fun of the weird kids in the anime club. And he agreed that those kids were weird, but he insisted it's not like that anymore. Maybe kids today are more accepting of anime, especially with celebrities like Michael B. Jordan and Megan Thee Stallion coming out as otaku. But that doesn't just get rid of all the people who already hate anime. What about all the boomers who were scarred by all those violent OVAs? Or all those millennials and Gen Xers who grew up bullying anyone who watched anime? Hell, even our anime and most other anime-related subreddits had to ban themselves from the front page of Reddit because the normies of the world kept jumping into the comments to spread hate. So I do think that anime's reputation is scarred by its past. But if newer generations are becoming more accepting, then maybe it's a scar that will heal with time.